Can you please articulate why Trump's many character flaws do not disqualify a Christian to vote for him? I could tackle this one.
Can we get a King David reference?
An interesting thing happens in the Bible. Paul kind of expounding on Jesus saying, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's." Paul makes this point that you should obey the governing authorities and basically stay out of revolutionary politics. And I think that was a really pragmatic thing for Paul to say, because the early church would have just been stamped out if it had taken any other position. But I also think that there's theological truth to it as well. But something does happen in a republic. There was no republic at the time that Paul was writing. The Roman Republic had been supplanted by the Roman Empire, and the Jews didn't live in a republic. Obviously, they were colonized by Imperial Rome. But in a republic, in a democratic republic, the government is comprised and given its power by the people. And in that sense, what Paul said, or what Christ said, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar," is not that isn't still true. It's just that relationship looks much different. You have a role in the government. And so it's not, I think, a fair New Testament position that you shouldn't be involved in the government when you live in a democratic republic. So to the extent that you do exist in a democratic republic, you have responsibilities. And one of those responsibilities is your vote. You don't always, in an electoral system, have the opportunity to vote for a great person. You very rarely have the opportunity to vote for a great person. You don't always have the opportunity to vote for a particularly good person. Nevertheless, you do have a vote, and that vote does come with responsibility, and it is a kind of power to impact the government. And so the choice before you in this election, I could not vote for Donald Trump in the primary, even though Ron DeSantis has already suspended his campaign. I voted for him in the Tennessee primary on Super Tuesday. Why? Because a primary is a party preference election, and I do not prefer Donald Trump to represent me. In a general election, however, it's not about my preference. It's now we're down to a true binary. Who is going to be the leader of the country? To whom will I confer what little piece of power I have in a Republican system to represent me and to represent the country? I don't have an option there for someone who I prefer, who actually has an opportunity where my vote can make a difference and actually help them be elected president. I saw this slightly differently in 2016. I thought there were a lot of unknowns around Trump that could be as bad as anything.
Perfectly fair.
I made a decision in 2016. 2020 was different because Trump had been president for 4 years, and I had seen
what it was.
Certainly he did bring some of the bad things I was worried about. He brought some good things that I never thought in a million years that he would bring. He didn't bring, and this is the critically important point, he didn't bring the worst things that I feared in 2016 he might bring. And so in 2020 he's a known quantity, and it became clear to me that even as a Christian who objects to many of the behaviors of Donald Trump, when I'm actually looking at the policy distinctions between Donald Trump and his opponent, Joe Biden, I need to use whatever power I have, not to endorse Trump, but to oppose the agenda of...
It's also fair to say that in 2016, both you and I had the luxury of being in a state that absolutely did not matter.
Wouldn't have mattered. Yeah,
we were in California. If we'd been in Ohio, I probably would have voted for Trump.
I think that's true. We would have made a different calculation.
But Antonin Scalia once said, when he is asked what it is to be a good Christian judge, he says it's to be a good judge.
Yeah.
And I think that the same thing is true of being a good voter, and I think a good Christian voter. That I'm not voting for the best Christian. That's not what I'm voting for. I'm voting for the best president that I think will win.
It's pretty simple. The other guy wants to kill babies,
trans kids,
right, and destroy the border, and he's hunting down pro-lifers and throwing them in prison. That's it. Like, what is there to even think about?
That's right. It's again, your vote doesn't say that Donald Trump is the person who you would prefer to be president out of all of the people. It says that Donald Trump is who you would prefer to be president in a race against Joe Biden.
Who's going to win? Yeah.
One of them will be. Do you guys think that we are realistically on the brink of World War III? And do you think Joe Biden being a weak leader is a main cause of that, Drew?
No,
I don't think we're on the brink of World War III. No, I think that I could see a series of events that would lead to World War III, but you can almost always see that. And I think the situation we're in is directly caused by his weakness and especially the chaotic leaving of Afghanistan. But the brink of World War III is that's a very strong for this situation we're in.
Brink means like right here.
Yeah, that's
right here,
that's the brink.
Well, okay, so I think that to be realistic, in order for there to be a World War III, you have to think about which powers would be involved in that World War. Russia does not want to go to nuclear war with the West. That is not a thing that Russia is pursuing or interested in.
Russia does not want to go to conventional war with the West.
It
would be the end of Russia.
Oh my God, they're getting destroyed by Ukraine, which is a second-rate military being armed with our old weaponry. I mean, there's that. I mean, where else could World War III come from? Iran is not capable of fighting a World War III. If Iran actually launched serious assaults on the United States would end that regime inside of 2 weeks. Like, really. China is capable of theoretically fighting with us, but China also does not want to do that. They see themselves declining, but they don't have the strength to seriously challenge. What they would do is make regional power grabs in places like Taiwan. They don't want to get into like a real shooting war with the United States military.
Well, they're fighting a different kind of Cold War with America right now. An information Cold War, a cybersecurity Cold War, a trade Cold War.
And it does resemble sort of the later stages of the Cold War in the sense that they have a collapsing demographic, a collapsing economy, an expanding military industrial complex, and a containment policy that's a problem. So, that's not going to be a Cold War. That'll be a bunch of regional wars around its borders, if anything. With that said, we have more war in the world now than we have at any time during really my lifetime, because in enough areas of the world you have these wars that are cropping up. Now, obviously, we had the war in Afghanistan, but that was like one place. We had the war in Iraq. That was one place, and we were directly involved. But in terms of like international conflagrations that could break out more broadly, we have two major ones right now. One in the center of Europe, and one obviously in the Middle East. Both of those are Joe Biden's fault. I mean, what's happening in Ukraine? Joe Biden literally said a month before the invasion of Ukraine that if basically Vladimir Putin just used the tip, he'd be fine. Yeah. Right? He was like, if you just take part of Ukraine, then it'll probably be okay. And Putin read that and he goes, okay, well, what about if I go like further than that? I mean, oops. And so there was that. There was the fact that he had already pulled out of Afghanistan and obviously had no stomach for any serious long-term conflict.
Communicated that very
right.
In a
it was his belief that
world.
He could split Europe based on European dependency on gas. And so he made a miscalculation, but that miscalculation was caused by Joe Biden's appearance of weakness. Yeah. In the Middle East, the real factor there is not Afghanistan, obviously. The real factor is re-engagement with Iran. The attempt to re-engage with Iran, the attempt to re-center Israeli-Palestinian policy at the center of Middle Eastern policy is the single worst foreign policy mistake of my lifetime. You had a burgeoning peace deal between a wide variety of Sunni states in the Middle East and Israel. All it would have taken for Saudi to sign on to a full normalization day one is like this much. All Biden would have had to do is basically just pat MBS on the back. Normalization would have happened. Hamas is now trapped and Iran is contained. It was like this close. And if Trump had been reelected, there is zero doubt, I mean less than zero doubt, that absolute 100% that would have happened. The first thing that Biden did is he came and he wrecked everything. He came in and he delisted the Houthis, which are Saudi's enemies, as a terrorist organization. He started renegotiating using Robert Malley, an Iranian cutout, as his go-to guy. He started talking about how Israel needed to make concessions to the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, both of which are Iranian-funded enterprises at this point. And all of these things simultaneously led Iran to believe that if they push hard enough, they're going to be able to scuttle all peace in the Middle East while killing a bunch of Jews. And to be fair to them, strategically, so far, that's been a success. I mean, strategically, by launching the war and forcing Israel, because what else are they going to do, to then go in and wipe Hamas out, they've obviously put any peace deal on hold because all the domestic populations in places like Saudi Arabia are not going to be super happy. But beyond that, what the next move the Biden administration is making is even more insane. The idea that the United States is going to put its force and weight behind a Palestinian state in the aftermath of the Palestinian government fomenting the worst terror attack in my lifetime or my parents' lifetime is so batshit insane that all it's going to do is lead other terrorist groups in the Middle East to think, okay, I mean, push where there's mush, man, go.
I think we are the closest to a third world war that we have been in my lifetime, with the possible exception of the early days of the Reagan administration. But I don't think that even compares. I think we're the closest we've been to a third world war in my lifetime, and I still don't think we're all that close.